The Civil War ended with over 600,000 dead and the Union preserved. But saving the Union wasn't enough. Sure, Lee surrendered and the Union survived, but victory on the battlefield didn't settle the biggest question of all. What was America going to do with the 4 million people who had just been freed from slavery? Were they citizens? Could they vote? Could states just slap new chains on them and call it law? The founders had dodged slavery in 1787, kicking the can down the road. But by 1865, that can had exploded. If America was going to stay true to all men are created equal, the Constitution itself had to change. And that's where the Reconstruction Amendments came in. The 13th ended slavery, the 14th rewrote citizenship and equality, not equity, equality, and the 15th gave black men the right to vote. 3 amendments born out of war that redefined the republic from the ground up. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that kept
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not one small step for man.
Those 3 hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
The 13th Amendment, 1865, ended slavery. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves only in the rebelling states, and even Lincoln admitted it might not survive peacetime. The 13th Amendment made it permanent. Slavery was outlawed everywhere in America. But the exception clause mattered. Except as punishment for crime was quickly weaponized by the southern states. They passed black codes for criminalizing trivial behavior, also Jim Crow laws, loitering, vagrancy, not having proof of employment, then arrested freedmen by the thousands. Once convicted, they were leased back out to plantations, railroads, and mines under the convicted leasing system. The South lost slavery in name, but clawed back forced labor in practice. And the fight over that loophole didn't end in the 1800s. It still fuels debate today about prison labor and mass incarceration. The 14th Amendment from 1868, citizenship and equal protection. This is a monster amendment. 5 sections that reshaped America, okay? And it is a huge area of debate now. So let's go over it by section. Section 1, citizenship, due process, and equal protection. This is the heavyweight section. This is the one everybody quotes, and it does 3 big things, okay? The citizenship clause. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. This was aimed directly at undoing the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which said black Americans could never be citizens. The 14th Amendment killed that ruling dead, and it made freed slaves and their children citizens. No debate, no loopholes. But here's the fight. What does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean? The framers said it didn't apply to foreign nationals temporarily here, right? Like ambassadors, foreign soldiers. And that's the heartbeat of today's debate over birthright, citizenship, and anchor babies. But in 1866, when Senator Jacob Howard introduced the language, he explained that it was not meant to cover foreigners or those owing allegiance to another power. Senator Lyman Thrumble, the co-author of the 14th, said jurisdiction meant not owing allegiance to anybody else. To me, that right there shows anchor babies can't exist. That's my opinion. That's what, again, the big word jurisprudence comes in. You study the law for yourself. Personally, going back to the original intent, people come here legally or illegally, have babies, but they're still, you come from China, you come from India, wherever, South America, you come here, your allegiance is still to that other country. You have a baby here, they're not citizens. I'm sorry. Original language of the amendment says it. Privileges, now this is the second section. Privileges or immunity clause. No state shall make or enforce any, not section 2. This is the second part of section 1. I apologize. No state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens. This was supposed to protect the basic rights from state infringement. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court gutted this clause in the Slaughterhouse case in 1873, basically stripping it of its power. The Due Process Clause. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This means states, not just federal government, have to respect due process. You can't be punished or lose property without fair legal procedures. And then the Equal Protections Clause. Nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of its laws. This became the backbone of the civil rights law, right? It means laws have to apply equally, no second-class citizens. Think Brown versus Board of Education, where the court struck down segregation using this clause. Okay, Section 2, representation. This section is about congressional seats. It said states would be represented in the House based on population, but if they denied the vote, to male citizens over 21, they lose representation. There's a fun fact. This is the first time the word male appeared in the Constitution. Women were still left out. We're going to get to that soon. Section 3, rebels barred from office. This one is Civil War fallout. If you were a Confederate officer or you swore an oath to the Union, but then rebelled, you couldn't hold federal or state office unless Congress gave you a 2/3 vote of forgiveness. Basically, no traitors running the government. I think we need to look at what the left is doing at the moment and apply that section to a lot of the individuals that are serving currently or have previously served President Obama. Section 4 covers public debt. The Union had racked up a mountain of war debt, and Section 4 guaranteed it would be honored. But Confederate debts or claims for emancipated slaves, those were declared void. The South wasn't getting reimbursed for losing the war. Section 5, enforcement. Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation and provisions of this article. This gave Congress teeth, the ability to pass laws to make sure the 14th actually worked. Later, this was the foundation for the landmark laws like the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. And you'll see this in the voting rights ones as well. What are they? The 17th? No. Well, you'll see them in the 17th, the 20th, the 27th. You'll see them in a lot of the later amendments where it'll say the same thing at the end, where it'll say the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation and provisions of this article. You see that at the end of most of those. The 14th just didn't repair the Union. It rewired the Constitution and making individual rights enforceable against the states, not just federal government. So let's talk about the 15th Amendment. This was in 1870, right? The rights to vote. The right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. This was the final piece, political power. Without the ballot box, freedom could be stripped away by hostile legislators. For the first time, the Constitution explicitly protected voting rights for black men. On paper, this was revolutionary. In practice, it was trench warfare. Southern states fought back with everything they had: poll taxes where you pay to vote, literacy tests, absurd quizzes like recite the entire Constitution, or grandfather clauses. You could only vote if your grandfather had been able to vote, conveniently cutting out freedmen. And of course, straight up violence and intimidation from groups like the KKK. Federal enforcement laws in the 1870s tried to back up this amendment, but once the Reconstruction ended in 1877, the South imposed Jim Crow. It would take the Voting Rights Act of 1665, nearly 100 years later, to finally enforce the 15th Amendment's promise. The Reconstruction Amendments just didn't fix the Constitution. They rewrote what it meant to be an American. The 13th ended slavery, the 14th made equality and citizenship national guarantees, and the 15th gave freedmen the ballot box, which is awesome. The right to vote in this country is one of the biggest privileges we have here. Together, they pushed the country toward the ideals, even as generations of states, courts, and mobs tried to slam the door shut. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And remember, history isn't boring, especially when 3 amendments written in the ashes of war turned the Constitution from a pact between states into a charter of freedom for every single citizen in this country. See you next time.